Welcome to Permission to Shine, the space where high-achieving women like you come to peel back the layers, overcome what's been holding you back, and rise into your most authentic, powerful self. I'm your host, Sherisse, inner power activation leader and intuitive healer, and a woman who knows what it means to look like she's thriving on the outside, also while feeling disconnected on the inside. This podcast is here to remind you, you didn't come here to just perform, you came here to lead with your soul. Your obstacles, they're invitations to expand. And your power, it was never outside of you. It's been waiting within you all along. Each week we'll dive into honest conversations, healing insight and soul-led strategies to help you stop self-sabotaging, reclaim your light and lead your life, your business and your relationships from deep-rooted truth. So if you're ready to rise with grace, softness and fire, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hi everyone, so I have another incredible international guest, and when her email came through, as soon as I read her story, I was really intrigued instantly, because I feel like being a child of an alcoholic, I found that there's lots of questions that I probably didn't have the answers to, and I felt like this would probably be a really healing conversation for me in lots of ways, because I feel like I could now, from my experience and all of the things that I do in my own work, I feel like I've made peace with that. But I felt like this is going to give such a different context to people in those situations. And I feel like it's such a powerful, place to be in. So I'd love to introduce you all to the amazing Colleen Clifford.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. That was a beautiful introduction. I hope I can fulfill that for you. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
No, well, there's no pressure. I feel like naturally it will give me some clarity. And also, if it doesn't, I feel like that's also a beautiful thing, because obviously this is about you and the listeners getting to know your story. And obviously, you are also an author as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do now and your title, and then we'll go into your story after that?
Yes, I commercially fish, and I'm still commercial fishing for a living. It's my bread and butter. And when I'm that's contractual work. So when I'm off the boat, I'm a health coach. I love writing, so I've finished my dream of, well, actually, we're in the process of editing the book, so it's not available yet. It will be available in July. We just pushed the published date further, which I hear is very normal in the book world. So that was funny. But anyway, yes, I'm writing in the process of writing my book. And yeah, I just love being on podcasts, having an opportunity to share the message that I feel compelled is kind of my birthplace to share. I've discovered that in my late ages of life. It's never too late to figure out why you were born. And I feel like this is it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I feel like we have to go on that journey first, right? Otherwise, there's nothing to
Absolutely.
share. And I think that's the journey of life, right? We learn, we pick up the things, and then we get to share when we get on the other side, which is really amazing. So obviously, being a fisherwoman, I'm really
Mhm.
excited to hear all about that as well, and obviously how the health element came into it. So I'd love for you to kind of give us maybe a nutshell of your story and your life and why the book and all of the things. So yeah, share as much as you want to, and I'll kind of dip in and ask more if I feel like there needs to be more there.
Thank you. Okay, it's getting yeah, I'm in my sixth decade of life, so there's a lot to share. So I will chop it down very quickly. So my thing is binge drinking. That's probably what compelled part of my story with you, I imagine. I'm a former binge drinker, and I'll explain what that is later. A lot of people have a different misconception about it, but I was able to stay in denial about my drinking habit. I don't consider myself an alcoholic, and so that part of my life and my struggle or my challenge always stayed with me from my 20s to my 60s. And so within that, I dropped out of college because I was partying too much. And when I dropped out of college, but I didn't connect the dots. When I dropped out of college, my friend was also a college dropout because she probably was partying too. Uh, and she was commercial fishing. So she said, "Hey, you want a job on a boat? Apply over here." So I did. That was 36 years ago. And the fishing life has been unusual, especially for a woman. And I never wanted to marry or have kids. So I was kind of like living a typical male life. I just kind of did what I wanted. I didn't have any responsibilities except myself, making sure I had a place to live, all that stuff. So the binge drinking always was intertwined with my life. Fast forward to later years, I did finally marry someone, and we were drinkers, and but not, we were the binge drinkers, but he ended up dying by suicide, alcohol related suicide, which that was 14 years ago. And I always like to just take a pause to honor that moment, and for all your listeners who maybe have been touched by suicide. Yeah, and so that really catapulted my life journey to where I'm sitting today and why I'm in front of you. And part of that is through my healing process, which was a long healing process. I made a promise to him and to myself that I would share his message because if within this conversation we can touch one person who needs to hear whatever we're sharing today, and that's my journey, and I believe he's on board with that. I'm very spiritual, and I carry him with me through all these conversations through my life, and I feel like I've had his presence show up to me, and so I feel like, the statistics show that if someone attempts suicide and doesn't succeed, they're typically happy they didn't. And so I feel like part of his message to me is that he's an apology, um and so it's keeping his name alive is part of why I'm here too. So
Hmm.
and here I sit today with you, and
Yeah.
I get to meet you, which is
Yeah,
beautiful.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing that because it is such a sensitive topic. And I feel your energy as you're sharing it. And it is just, a beautiful honor that you get to share this for him as well, but also for you, right? Because as you said, that was the catalyst of change in your life, seeing and witnessing,
Hmm.
experiencing it. And I think as a child of someone that had alcoholic liver disease and died from that, the impact
Mm.
is catastrophic, but also the emotional roller coaster that alcohol or addiction in general just takes you on. It takes your soul away, I believe. I personally feel like my dad was depressed 90% of the time, and I do believe that alcohol enhanced that massively. And we went through journeys where he was convinced that he was terminally ill and would say that he had cancer and all these things. It was like such a roller coaster ride of emotion. And I think that maybe with binge drinking, it feels like at the time it's recreational. So it doesn't feel like it's an addiction more so. But, when it leads you to down that really dark pathway, I even watched my dad make choices that didn't align with us as a family, didn't support us as a family throughout the majority of my time that he was alive. And so I just send absolute compassion to, your partner has passed because I know that, yeah, there would be remorse and hardship in that journey across. And I'm very spiritual too. And even for my dad, I was told that he found it hard to cross over because of that. So I honor that for you. And I feel like, yeah, what we choose to do now going forward is really the catalyst of the change, the transformation. And like you said, sharing that with people that maybe need to hear that, maybe need that awakening, maybe they need to be in the same journey with you that maybe have had an addiction and need to see that there is another side. So thank you for being here and sharing all of that. And I'd love to know now what that healing process looked like for you, because obviously, like you said, it was a long journey. So I'd love to know more.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing so much of that, of your life and your experience. You brought up a good point, which was part of my journey. So I'll kind of combine the two, that in the binge drinking, and I don't know your father's situation, but you do things, once you have so much alcohol, your body's just trying to cope with getting the drug out of it. And you can black out, and it just takes one moment of binge drinking to change a life forever. And so what can keep us stuck, and what kept me stuck for years, is I did not consider myself an alcoholic because I didn't think about drinking every day. I didn't drink every day. And a lot of times when I drank, I could control it. Now, I always had kind of some parameters around it because I would say to myself, I'm only going to have two. When I'd go visit my parents, I would like behave. Certain situations, you're like, okay, I'm not going to get trashed. But on the times when I didn't have anything planned for the next day and I had, time and nowhere to be and I felt like partying, I would party. And so what happened for me is I could deny that I had a problem. The thing with binge drinking, I also noticed for me, is that it can tip you over to where you do act inauthentically within the drinking. And that's when you wake up the next day and you've got a shameful feeling of remorse, like, wow, I didn't plan to drink so much. How did that happen? It just kind of took over. I was only going to have two and I had six. I mean, and what did I say last night because you black out? So for me, I just came to a point, even when my late husband died, I wasn't drinking actually at the time, but then I started drinking in my healing journey after 2 years because I fell into a depression. So it wasn't until I did something out of character that could have killed another that I woke up one day 5 years ago. Quite honestly, it's almost 5 years. And I said, this isn't who I want to be. And that's when my journey changed. That's when I changed.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And that's that radical accountability that I think a lot of people don't get to, you know. So, celebrating you for that moment, because that is such a hard thing to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm being the problem right now and I need to do something about it. So, gosh, yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. It's so powerful. And I'd love to know then, what was your process in coming back to, well, I'm guessing it's obviously first of all taking the accountability, but in regards to like your health journey and all of the things, like what were the next steps you kind of took from there?
Right. So part of my hang up was inability to ask for help. And so I was very proud. I'm still proud and I'm independent and I still am, but I wasn't willing to allow anyone in. I didn't want to admit I had a problem. Once I did that, I was like, okay, obviously throughout my life, I haven't been able to stop this problem on my own. So maybe it's time to actually get some help. So I sought out help for myself. I'd already been doing therapy, so I didn't, everyone needs, if anyone's listening and they're like thinking, wow, this sounds like me, there's so many different types of help out there. So it's just a matter of thinking what might resonate for you. And I found the thing that resonated for me. For some people, it could be AA. There's all kinds of programs out there. There's Women for Sobriety, and I don't know if all your listeners are women, but Men for Sobriety. There's all kinds of programs, and then coaching programs. So it's just, and we have Google now. So that was my first step of saying, okay, I had to come to terms that the only way I knew that I would never do something like what I did again was to eliminate alcohol. I knew alcohol was the problem. It wasn't me, it wasn't my character. It was when I drank, sometimes this is what could happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like when you said about the asking for help or accepting help, I'm there with you. I that has been 100% part of my healing process. So my dad was one of 11 members of my family that died back to back when I was between the ages of 12 to 17. And then
Wow.
obviously growing up with him being an addict and then growing up in an area that wasn't culturally diverse, I just became very masculine. So, when you said about, you'd been quite independent most of your life, that was me. And also carrying the emotional responsibility that my dad was supposed to carry in our family home. So when it came to, my early 20s, even into my late 20s, I was carrying this chip on my shoulder that, life was hard and all these things and like fighting my way through every scenario. And I was a professional dancer, which I fought my way to get to as well. And then when
Wow.
the pandemic hit, and I couldn't force my way through my career anymore because my addiction was working hard. So then when I couldn't push anymore, I crumbled. And for the first time in my life, I had to ask for help. And that in itself was such a scary thing. And I was reminded of it again last year. Like I had more repeated patterns from like those times in the lockdown and, like, I guess death from a place of not being armored up, like 'cause I experienced so much of it growing up that every death I've had since then, I guess it's more vulnerability and it depends on the person and all of the things. But it just last year was very mirroring of who I used to be and coming at it from a different place and asking for help and receiving it was such a big thing. And I resonate so much with what you just shared there.
Wow, Sherisse, that's beautiful. And isn't it, here's something I wanted to add on top of what you just shared, which is so true. I can relate to so much of what you're saying in myself as well. And I think it's common, right?
Mm,
We're taught to be independent and strong and just do it ourselves. But the thing I realized, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I realized that asking for help is courageous. I
mm,
was so afraid to do it too. Like just, it's like the first time you go swimming and you jump in the deep end. It's like, oh, but you do it and you realize you're going to swim and
mm,
you're actually maybe going to swim across the pool and become this amazing swimmer. And so, and in your case, it's dancing, right? And now that I know that, when something comes up in my life, because life isn't over yet, and I'm still going to have the things that challenge me, I know now I can ask for help. And
mm.
it's really comforting.
Yeah, definitely. It's so, so powerful. And I feel like that feeling that we have of having to do it on our own. I'm so frustrated that we were kind of taught that. And it's funny because I think it's ironic that women used to live in this way, tribal times and ancestral times that we've all worked and lived in community. And so this real modern generation had us thinking that it was like you have to be independent and strong and do it by yourself to prove a point. And actually, now I'm realizing more so that going back to those old ways of being in circle, connecting with other women, especially to say that, hey, you don't have to carry this by yourself. And I think that
Mm.
that's just a really beautiful space that we get to be in now. And through us accepting help, we then get to give more. And I think that's the beautiful full circle in all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'd love to know, well, first of all, obviously the podcast is called Permission to Shine. So I'd love to know in your story, and it may be later down the line that we've not got to yet, but when do you feel like for yourself, you've really given yourself the permission to shine? And it can be more than one time.
Wow. I I don't really think I've allowed myself to shine until the last few years.
Mm,
I feel like until I could really learn to love myself, which I feel like I'm at now, that I'm enough how I am right now. And it's sad. It's not sad to say, but it's taken a long time. I'm 63 this year. And and kudos to those younger folks like yourself who are on your wellness journey younger. I mean, I think it's just beautiful the availability now to explore your growth and have these connections and conversations, which I just love. Um, and so it's just become until recently that I'm shining the brightest I ever have. And I'm really excited because it makes aging that much more joyful. like I'm not afraid to age any longer, because if in my 60s I'm starting off like this, I can't wait to get older. It's just going to get better. I don't see how I can slide downhill. Um, I really don't. I mean, it's always a possibility, right? But now I have some tools to climb back out quicker. So
Mm,
I'm just really excited to be where I'm at, and just grateful that I have had the opportunity to get to this place before
yeah,
I die.
absolutely. And I think, I mean, one, you look incredible, by the way, for 63.
Thank
And I do believe that happier people do look younger. I think personally, I feel like there's something that I feel like the serotonin just like seeps out of your skin, almost. And it's that joyfulness, which is something we probably never gave ourselves permission to have, when you're in that cycle of feeling trapped or in your own sort of stuff. And I would love to know as well, like in that point where you were drinking. Do you feel like you were using the binge drinking to escape something?
Yes. I had I just did not love myself. I had an incident happen in my 20s that created so much shame for me. I internalized it as, and shame is where you feel like you're unlovable. And the interesting thing I realize now is that after the event happened, and the event's not really, I mean, it's important as far as my life and how it changed the trajectory. But the thing is it's the story I told myself after it happened. I created this story that I was unlovable, and I locked it away in my heart, in my brain. It's almost like I forgot it happened throughout most of my life. But I never allowed anyone to prove my story wrong, because I was convinced I wasn't lovable. No one would want to marry me. I was never going to have kids. And like you know, put on my masculine energy, my armor. I don't need anybody except my family. I don't need a relationship. And so it's interesting now that I look at my stories I tell myself, and that was the biggest story that changed the trajectory of my life. But now, even in my day-to-day actions, when I create these stories about something that happened, or maybe a story around a person, if we notice our conversations, we like to, without really knowing what's going on with someone, we like to create a story like, oh, well, maybe they're just tired, or maybe they had some, we don't really know. I mean, unless we ask the person what's going on. So it's just interesting that I'm I'm exploring that now within my awareness, and it's really fascinating when my mind starts to tell a story. I'm like, well, wait a minute, is that really true? And until I have the proof, it isn't true. It's a story. And so it's like, just what stories are we telling ourselves that might not be true? And that's something I'm digging up, even like when I look back on my life, what stories did I tell myself? And part of me is like releasing the sadness I that I was so closed to having love and opportunity. I wouldn't allow it. And so I created a lot of angst for myself that I didn't need to create. And, I'm just grateful I have the time now to embrace that and feel I'm lovable. I didn't die without getting through this process. And so I feel very, very like my day-to-day life is like, whoa, I get another day to just be on the top of the clouds, instead of waiting for the rain to fall.
That's such a lovely analogy as well. Like, being in the clouds and not waiting for the rain to fall. I feel like I talk a lot about being in our power. And I feel like what you're
Mhm.
explaining is being in your power. And I feel like for us as women, I talk to women because obviously that's who I work with. But for humans in general, I feel like you said, we are made up of stories that we've either told ourselves, we've witnessed, or we've been told as children. And all of these narratives run through our mind all the time, and they make up our reality. But what we don't get taught is that we get to change the stories that are being told to ourselves. And I notice it even in myself, I can run away with something and then try to create the story the way I want it to go. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, let's just rein that all back. But it's a natural part of being human, and the great way of us learning and evolving is when we can stop, like you said, that story from manifesting into more than it needs to be, but also just silencing it for a moment as well and saying, hey, I'm in control here. We're not gonna do that.
It's all
But
up here,
yeah, exactly. But the shame, honestly, like I feel that so deeply and I see it in my clients, and I know that the shame, the blame, all of those feelings, they get stuck in the body. And I feel like we're all
Absolutely.
trying to suppress them, aren't we? And like you said, for you, it looked like drinking. For me, it looked like overworking. For a lot of women, it can be lots of different variations of that. But we're all trying to do something to push it down. And actually, all we need to do is let it out. And I think the moment we stop storing it in our body and getting it out of our body, either by talking about it or moving through it, whatever it is, that's the freedom piece, right? I feel like you're now in a position, and I can feel it within you, that that doesn't hold you to anything anymore. Like you're free from it, which is where the power lies, I believe, is when we get to stand in our truth and own our story, our bodies, and all of the things. And that's where we become the co-creator of our reality as opposed to the victim of it. And I feel like you're really the embodiment of that.
Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful, Sherisse. I can't wait to listen to this again. Um, so what I was going to say, I don't think I really answered your question, but within the shameful event that happened, your last question, because I didn't love myself in my binge drinking, I was living recklessly and I was pushing the boundary of death. Like there were things I did where I should be dead a number of times, and a lot of people probably can relate to that. And it was subconscious because I look now, until I started getting help to release the story I created, and that wasn't for about 12 years. I was living very recklessly. Once I started going to therapy, that was in my early 30s. Um, it My binge drinking wasn't about trying to die. It was just more about partying and what have you. So yeah.
No, I feel you. It's such a it's heavy, but also freeing, isn't it? At the same time, it's one of those things. It's almost a bit like a rock. You have to give it a little push, and then it starts to roll on its own. But I know that every time we bring these things up, it is also processing it again. So thank you for sharing it because I feel like it's so important. And as I said, you sharing this is just giving someone else a permission to do the same thing. So I feel like this is obviously the important thing of this podcast. So thank you. I would love to know. So if someone listening is maybe in the early stages of acknowledging that they have maybe an addiction or something isn't quite right, maybe like 3 steps you'd recommend someone doing if they're at the same point that you were at when you knew something needed to change.
Hmm. Yeah. If you're questioning it, you're probably intuitively feeling that something needs to shift for you, that maybe you're not living your authentic self. And so that's really number one, right? Awareness around, okay, is this who I want to become within whatever it is you're doing? In my case, it was binge drinking. Always the next day I'd wake up and go, whoa. And so if you're in that space, yeah, acknowledging it. And then the second I would say is create a game plan around that. Like what do you need to take out of your life to become the person you want to be? And most of us know what that thing is. And then, sometimes it's scary to think, oh, I'm going to remove, for me, it was alcohol. Like I didn't want to. That's what kept me stuck for so long. So another question you can ask yourself is, well, okay, so maybe I'm not ready to totally take this out of my life, but what can I add to my life to kind of squeeze that out of my life? And if that means joining a group or, getting coaching or start talking about it with people you trust. Those are really the first steps, I think, of change. But you really have to get to the heart of honesty with yourself because I was so good at talking myself out of a problem 2 or 3 days later after my binge drinking, when the hangover starts going away and I think, oh, I'm okay. I only drink like that once every 3 months. It's not a problem. I got my act together. I go to work. So, if you're a binge drinker like I was, just try to remind yourself it only takes one moment of partying to destroy your life forever. And so, is that a card or a gamble you want to take in life?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I feel like the way you've explained it is so clear because I know a couple of people in my life that have been in similar situations where they just have fun at the weekend and all week they'll be fine. Or,
Mm.
quote unquote fine because they're actually in a massive come down from it in a depressive state. And so the only way they feel like they can get out of it is through drinking again at the weekend. And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of shame around doing that pattern, and especially now where we're talking about health a lot more and stuff. And I feel like the way you've just normalized it as this just happens, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just the pattern in which you decided to carry out in your life. But the most important part of that is saying, hey, is this really serving me? Maybe not.
Mhm.
And I love when you said about squeezing something else in to push it out. That was such a lovely way. I've never heard of that before, but it makes so much sense because, for me, when you start to have different friends, for example, like when you're growing up and you've got your friends from school and then you go to college and then you have college friends, you start to realize maybe that the school friends don't align with your values anymore. And so those new friends are starting to push out the old ones only
Mhm.
those old friends aren't in alignment with you because if they're not, if they are in alignment, they'll mix together. But for like, say for example, we take alcoholism, if you started a group that was knitting, for example, where people drank tea, you wouldn't be drinking in that space. And then you'll realize that actually I enjoy knitting, I enjoy drinking tea and having good conversations that don't involve alcohol. So why would I put myself in that situation again? So thank you for that. I feel like that's a really clear beautiful option for a lot of people to do. So that was lovely. Thank you. And so
You're
I want,
welcome.
I want you to tell us more about your book. So just give us like a bit of a synopsis of your book.
Okay, it's a memoir, but it's also reflective for the reader. I don't want it to be all about me, like my life and blah, blah, blah. Although I do throw commercial fishing stories in and, part of my journey. But throughout the whole thing, I'm offering for the reader to reflect how's it working for you. And I'm not preaching to anyone that you need to quit drinking. It's just always asking the question, how's it working for me? Because some people don't want to take alcohol out of their life. And that's great. If you can balance drinking responsibly with living, cool. Like I wish I could. But I came to the point where no, it wasn't going to work for me. So the book is about alcohol, the dangers of alcohol, but it's also about like returning home to your essence because part of my journey was, I was had a great childhood for the most part. It wasn't until this story I created changed the trajectory of my life and it's taken me years to come full circle. And so I relate it to like finding your inner North Star because I'm nautical, so I like, have to throw some celestial water terms in my book. And so it's the journey home and the North Star, if for those who aren't familiar, it's the mariner's star to get home. When mariners had to use celestial navigation, which nobody does anymore, but which is sad, really. But yeah, no one hardly even looks at charts either, which is also sad. But anyway, that's what my book is. It's about like finding your North Star throughout my stories and other people's stories. I also have some other folks contributing in the book. They were willing to share. So
Yeah,
yeah. So
nice.
it's been fun to write.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I love astrology. Like it's a real tool that I use in my work. So
Mm,
the North Star, I was like, oh yes, I know. It's so lovely. And
it is.
I was thinking about Moana, like she's a wayfinder
Yeah,
and she's there to like, find the
yes,
current. And that's how
yes,
I knew about it.
totally.
Yeah, and I
I
love
would love to be Moana.
yeah, and I love that connection to the sea and the stars. Like I feel
Hmm.
like that's such a beautiful space. And like I know fisherman is quite a masculine thing, but I almost feel there's a little bit of femininity in it through that way, like so
Yes.
beautiful. I bet you've
Yeah,
got
I refer to the ocean as a she. Um,
yeah.
so in her beauty, uh, yeah. So
Love that. I bet you've got some really funny stories as well from what fish do you normally catch? What is the
it's called pollock.
oh
It's the
yeah, we
pollock
know.
industry, yes. And most of us are fishing. Well, Russia fishes for pollock, and but we're over in the Bering Sea by Alaska, in between Alaska and Russia, and Japan's over there, and so we're pretty far north
Wow.
usually.
So that's freezing then over there when you're
It's
doing.
very cold, yeah.
Oh my
Yes, it
gosh.
is. Yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of trippy. I still can't believe it. It's kind of like flying in a plane when you're above the world and you're like going, whoa. When you think about it, you're encapsulated just thousands of feet up in the air. And it's kind of the same on the boat. We're encapsulated in this comfortable, warm environment, yet we're on the sea, which she can be powerful at times. And it's kind of shocking that we get to we get to habitate or whatever that word is, live on it and do our thing. It's pretty fascinating. Just remind you how small you are because the world's a beautiful place. We
Mm,
need to keep it that way.
I agree. I actually went vegetarian in 2021. Um, because of that reason, really. I was like, oh, I don't think I can eat any more like land and sea because I just feel like the way we've done this to the world. I mean, technically it was because of my health that I stopped eating it, but now I'm more so like the eco side of things. I'm like, oh gosh, what are we doing? But yeah, I love the way you just described that about being so small and you're in this like ocean that can be so wild and turbulent, and yet here we are just
Mhm.
floating along. It's just such a beautiful analogy, I think, for life as well, isn't it? And I feel like it's
Mhm.
that saying, just keep swimming. It almost is that, isn't it? Like, you're gonna withstand some storms and like some rocky places, but ultimately it'll always come calm in the end, won't it? And there's
Mhm.
so much treasure under that ocean and above it as well, which is just, yeah, so wonderful. So
Mhm.
if people want to know more about, what it is you do in terms of, you said you do the health coaching and things like that. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that side of things?
Sure. I have two websites. One is lifebeyondthebinge.com and another is purepotential.health. And so if you check those out, you'll see what I offer. There's about me. I like to write, so I write blogs on fishing, on health and wellness, on binge drinking, on some just life reflections. Excuse me. And so yeah, it's basically, when I do work with a client, it's about what's going on in their life, like the overall health and wellness. And we really do have the answers within ourselves. And as I can imagine you're an amazing coach. It's helping the client extract what they need to do and then holding them accountable.
Yeah.
And then if they, have a moment where they're not sure, you can offer a suggestion like, I hear you saying this, how would this work? Like I said about squeezing out, adding in which squeezes out, adding in what you want, squeezes out what you don't want. And so those types of suggestions. So,
Oh,
yeah.
amazing. I love that. So we'll put all of your notes in the description as well. So all of your links and things like that. And then obviously when the book comes out, we'll share your link in the notes. So we'll go back and add that in. And then obviously if you share it on social media or whatever, everyone will be able to see that they follow you as well, which would be lovely. To round off the episode, I always like to do a bit of a soul to soul message. So it could be maybe something you feel like you needed to hear, or maybe something right now that you just want to share that's on your heart.
I think I'd like to share what's on my heart right at the moment, especially in today's world and where there's so much going on that's out of our control, fear-based, like what's going to happen, what's going on, why are these things happening? Um, I know that what helps me stay grounded is to only listen to it in small snippets, but just remind myself that we're all connected in spirit and in love. And I try to remind myself that at the end of the day, when I die, what people believe isn't going to matter to anything in the afterlife, whatever your beliefs are about after we die. And some people maybe believe nothing happens, but and that's, we all have our beliefs, but I try not to take things so seriously, and it's a challenge because, if we're people that care, it's it's easy to get over emotional about things. So I just in my practice, what I'm trying to do, especially in our tumultuous world right now, is just in my interactions, remind myself that people just really do want peace and love and to be connected and to just walk through life with that vibe. I hope that was helpful.
No, that was lovely. And I
That's not what I'm feeling right now.
well, I completely agree with you. And I think always it's tuning in, isn't it? Always just coming back to you. And if you are being and feeling consumed by the outside world, like you said, it's about, okay, well, how can I bring my awareness back to me? Because we can't really control what's happening externally. All we can control is how we feel. And I think that that's,
Mhm.
if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or whatever, go and do something you like doing for a change and take your mind off of things because yeah, we can't put too much pressure on what's happening outside of us. I feel like that leads to overwhelm and all the things, doesn't it? Micromanaging and all of that. As women, we like to do that. But yeah, thank you for that beautiful reminder. It's been so lovely speaking to you, Colleen. You're such a lovely soul. It's been really beautiful to connect and hear your story.
Oh, same to you. Thank you so much for offering your space. It's been just beautiful.
Thank you. Well, all of your notes will be in the description so people can find you. And thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please do like, follow and share with a woman that you know needs to hear these words today. The more women that get to listen, the more impact and change and transformation I get to make into this world, and the light in you shines on others. So sharing that forward is absolutely the mission of this. This is how we all give and get and receive the permission to fully shine. I also have some really incredible things happening this year. I'm hosting the second She Rises event in April. So if you want to find out more about that, click the link in the description. And I'm now newly launching my first ever group program that is called Unforgettable. And it's taking you from performing visibility to embodied authority. So whether that's host your own podcast or being on stage or being the leader of your field, and you're ready to fully embody this version of you that has this dream and ambition, that you know the limiting beliefs, the childhood experiences, the generational trauma that has stopped you and prevented you from fully stepping into who you came here to be. This is the space where we get to write a new story, a new chapter in your life. And I'm so excited to hold that space for you. And as always, if you're looking for one-to-one guidance and support, drop me a message, because there's always spaces available for you. I'm sending you so much love.